By spring you'll birth me 3 sons." Those were the first words the mountain man ever spoke directly to Judith Yoder. And they were the last words she expected to hear on the worst day of her life. Snow clouds hung low over the Montana Territory settlement, turning the Amish meeting house into a dark, heavy box of judgment and whispers. Judith stood in the middle of the plain wooden room, hands folded over her apron, trying to keep her breathing steady as 5 elders decided the rest of her life. "Sister Judith," Bishop Stoltzfus said, his voice gentle but unyielding, "we have prayed on this for many months. You are 28 years old. You are still unmarried, and—" His eyes flicked down just for a heartbeat to the way her dark dress strained over her wide hips and broad shoulders. "Your size has become difficult for the community." Judith already knew the words by heart. She had heard them in murmurs behind her back since she was a teenager. Too big. Too much.
"Eats like 2, works like 3, but still a burden. You consume resources meant for growing families," another elder added. "We cannot carry you forever. Unless a husband comes forward by the end of this month, we will arrange for you to be taken to the mission in Helena. There, among the English, you may find work more suitable." The room was silent except for the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. Judith swallowed hard. Her parents lay in the cemetery behind the church, beneath simple headstones. Her childhood, her mother's recipes, her father's hymns, her whole world, all rooted in this soil.
"Where would I go?"
she whispered.
"I have no kin outside, no money, no English schooling. This is my home."
"The Lord will provide," Bishop Stoltzfus said, the way men always did when they were about to turn their backs. "For now, go in peace, sister." She stepped out into the sharp winter air, the sky a flat sheet of iron above the bare fields. Children stared at her from doorways. A few women watched from behind curtains. Judith wrapped her shawl tighter around her broad shoulders and walked, not sure where her feet were taking her, only knowing she had to move or she would fall. She reached the edge of the settlement, where the fields gave way to trees, and finally let herself sag against a fence post. The wind cut through her dress. 2 weeks, they had said. 2 weeks to find a husband in a community where every man had already decided she was too much of everything and not enough of anything. "They're fools," a deep voice said from the tree line. Judith jerked upright, heart pounding. A man stepped out from the shadows beneath the pines, bringing the wilderness with him. He was huge, taller than any man she'd seen, shoulders like a barn door wrapped in buckskin and fur. His hair was long, black shot with silver, his beard wild but clean, his eyes dark and steady as they took her in. Not just her body. Her. "Who are you?" she managed. He tipped his head, just a fraction. "Name's Ezekiel Thorne. Folks up here call me Zeke. I trade with your people. I heard what they told you." His mouth twisted. "Sending you away because you take up too much room at the table. Fools." "I should not speak with you alone," Judith said automatically, the rules of her upbringing kicking in even as her world fell apart. "You are English." "I'm a mountain man," he corrected calmly. "And I'm also a man who knows a good thing when he sees it." His gaze held hers, unwavering. "You need a husband. I need a wife who can work and who won't break in the first hard winter." He paused, and his next words fell like a stone into the silence between them. "Marry me, Judith Yoder. Come to my mountain. By spring you'll birth me 3 sons." For a long, stunned moment, all she could hear was the wind in the bare branches and the pounding of her own heart. 3 sons. by spring.
Where are you listening from out there in the world? If this were you, cast out for your body, offered a wild prophecy instead of a safe little life, would you take the mountain man's hand? The morning after Ezekiel Thorne made his outrageous proposal, Judith Yoder stood outside her family's old house, staring at the frost-crusted fields she had plowed, planted, and harvested since girlhood. It no longer belonged to her. The elder's decision had sealed that. Every board, every stone, every memory now felt like a place she was being pushed out of rather than welcomed into. Zeke arrived at sunrise, just as Amish men hitched their horses for the day's chores. His presence brought the entire settlement to a standstill. He rode a massive roan stallion, a pack mule trailing behind. In the pale morning light, he looked almost unreal. Too large, too wild, too alive. His buckskin coat was patched from years of wear, his boots heavy with mountain mud, his shoulders dusted with the night's snowfall. He swung off the horse with the effortless grace of a man who lived without fear. Judith felt 100 eyes watching from doorways, from behind barn doors, from behind veils of frost-rimmed windows. "You ready?" Zeke asked quietly. She wasn't, not even close, but she nodded anyway. The bishop had already been notified. He stepped out of the meeting house, Bible in hand, his expression a mixture of relief and unease. "Brother Thorne," he greeted stiffly, "you understand the seriousness of taking an Amish woman as wife." "I understand marriage fine," Zeke replied. "I also understand this woman's worth." The bishop opened the Bible, cleared his throat, and began the ceremony. It was short. Amish weddings were usually long, elaborate affairs, but this one lasted barely 5 minutes. A mercy, Judith supposed. No one wanted spectacle today. Judith's palms were sweating inside her mittens. Her breath fogged with each trembling exhale. Her dress, her best blue wool one, strained around her middle and hips. She felt every curve like a crime on display. Zeke, by contrast, stood calm as a carved stone pillar beside her. When the bishop said, "You may seal this covenant," Zeke didn't hesitate. He lifted Judith's chin with gentle fingers and kissed her. It wasn't like the fumbling, awkward pecks she had imagined. His lips were warm. His beard brushed her skin softly. And the way his hand steadied her jaw, it made something deep inside her loosen just a little. He didn't kiss her like a man doing a duty, but like one accepting a gift he'd chosen. He murmured, "That's one of many to come, wife." And she felt her face burn hot. The witnesses signed the marriage record, 2 elders and Sister Martha, who gave Judith a tight, emotional smile. Then it was done. Judith Yoder became Judith Thorne. As they prepared to leave, Sister Martha stepped forward with a parcel wrapped in linen. "For the wedding night," she whispered. "Herbs for easing pain, and for helping conception." Her eyes softened. "I am sorry, Judith. You deserved better than how we treated you." It was the closest thing to an apology Judith would ever receive from her community. When she climbed into Zeke's wagon, her heart cracked open at what she saw. Every woman who had ever avoided her gaze now openly staring. Some whispered, some turned away, some crossed themselves as if she were walking into sin. Only one person stepped forward, young Samuel, the stonemason's son who had teased her relentlessly years ago but now looked ashamed. "Goodbye, Judith," he said quietly. "May the Lord go with you." "May he go with you also," she managed. Then Zeke flicked the reins and the wagon jerked forward. Judith didn't look back until they rounded the bend. When she finally did, her home, her church, her entire world grew smaller and smaller until it was swallowed by the snowy horizon. They traveled in silence the first hour,
Judith gripping the seat so tightly her fingers hurt.
"You're free of them now," Zeke said at last, not unkindly.
I wasn't trying to be free, she murmured. I just didn't fit.
Zeke snorted. A woman like you doesn't fit in tiny boxes built by tiny minds. That settlement didn't deserve you. She flinched. No one had ever spoken of her like that. Not as a burden, not as a mistake, but as something valuable. You're quiet, Zeke observed.
I've never left home before.
You're not leaving home, he said simply. You're going to it. The snow grew deeper as the road narrowed. Pines closed around them like cathedral columns. The wind quieted, replaced by the soft creak of leather and hoofbeats sinking into drifts. Judith watched Zeke guide the horses with steady hands, unbothered by cold or distance. He belonged out here, not just surviving, but thriving. Wild lands answered to him. Her breath fogged the air.
Why me, Zeke? Not the prophecy. I mean, truly, why?
He didn't answer immediately.
When he did, his voice was roughened by honesty. Because I've lived alone long enough to know what matters. I don't need delicate. I don't need small. I need strong, loyal, steady. A woman who won't give up in the first bad storm. He glanced sideways at her. A woman who doesn't break. A woman built for winter.
Judith felt heat rise in her chest, an emotion she didn't have a name for yet. She had been unwanted all her life because of her size. This man spoke of her size like it was a blessing, a strength, a calling. By sundown, they had climbed high into the foothills. Zeke pointed ahead. Another hour, he said. Then we reached the cabin. Supper, a warm fire. He paused, voice thickening. And then we start our marriage proper, if you're willing. Her pulse jumped. Tonight. Their wedding night. Her first time. She swallowed hard. I will try to be brave. Zeke's voice gentled. You already are. The cabin lights flickered through the pines.
Her new life waited within. The cabin appeared through the trees like something carved straight from the mountain itself. Wide timbers, stone chimney smoking against the cold sky, lamplight glowing through thick-paned windows. Judith had never seen anything so solid, so alive with warmth, so utterly unlike the plain, drafty Amish houses she'd grown up in. Zeke guided the wagon into the clearing and halted the horses. Snowflakes drifted around them, soft as breath. "Welcome home, Judith," he said, climbing down and offering his hand. Home. The word hit her harder than she expected. She let him help her down. The ground was uneven, and her weight made her unsteady after hours of travel. But Zeke lifted her as though she weighed nothing more than a well-packed sack of flour. It startled her. Amish men never touched her unless absolutely necessary. No man ever acted as if her size caused no difficulty at all. Inside, the cabin was warm, smelling faintly of wood smoke, pine sap, and something rich and comforting simmering in a pot over the fire. The main room had a broad hearth, a sturdy table, shelves lined with jars and tools, and furs layered over polished wooden floors. "Sit," Zeke said, gesturing to the chair nearest the fire. Judith obeyed, though her heart raced. She watched as he removed his coat, hung it on a peg, stirred the pot, and ladled out a bowl of stew. When he set it in front of her, steam rising, she murmured, "I can serve myself, Zeke." "I know you can," he said, "but you're my wife. First night in my home, you eat first." No man had ever said such a thing to her. In her old community, the men ate before the women,
and she, being large, was always expected to take less so others would not think her greedy. Now a man served her with reverence. She ate quietly, warming from the inside out. Zeke ate after her, in long, slow bites, his eyes flicking to her now and then, not judging, not measuring, simply watching her exist. When the bowls were cleaned, the fire stirred, and the lamps lowered, Judith realized the world had grown too quiet, too expectant. Her hands began to tremble. Zeke noticed. "You're afraid," he said simply, not accusing, only naming the truth. Judith stared into the fire. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do, what a man expects, what I should be. I've never been touched, never been wanted." Zeke moved slowly, deliberately, until he knelt in front of her chair. She gasped at the sight, this enormous man kneeling at her knees like a supplicant. "Look at me, Judith." She lifted her gaze, breath hitching. "I don't expect performance," he said. "I don't expect perfection. I expect honesty. You give me that, and I'll give you everything else." Her throat tightened. "But my body is your body," he said simply.
The one that gets you through hard days. The one that will bear my children. The one I've chosen. There's nothing about it I fear or dislike." His eyes softened. "I've bedded no other woman since my youth, Judith. I'm a virgin in many ways, too. 15 years of solitude will do that. We'll learn each other." She blinked. "You? But you're a man of the world, a mountain man. You must have—" "No. I gave myself to one woman long ago. Never again." His voice roughened. "You're the first I've wanted since. The only." Something in Judith cracked open then, not fear, but something like aching relief. He rose slowly and extended his hand. "Come upstairs with me. If at any point you want to stop, we stop. If you're unsure, we wait. This marriage will never be a burden to you." Her breath shook. "I'll come." The loft stairs creaked under them. Judith's heart hammered so loud she thought the whole cabin must hear it. At the top, the bed waited, broad, piled with furs, warmed by the fire below. She froze.
Zeke turned to her, his face illuminated by lantern light. "Judith, let me help you feel safe." He stepped close, but not too close, lifted his hands, palms open, waiting for her permission. She nodded. He touched her cheeks first, barely a whisper of contact, then her jawline, then the back of her neck. Everywhere he touched, warmth bloomed. "Tell me if something frightens you," he murmured. "I will," she whispered back. "Good. Now, I need you to undress, slowly, so I can see you. All of you." Her breath caught. She had avoided mirrors her entire life, avoided disrobing around other women. She had wrapped her body in layers, hid herself behind fabric and shame. Her fingers fumbled with the buttons of her dress. It took forever. Zeke waited, patient, unmoving. When the last button slipped free, the heavy wool fell away. She stood in her linen shift, trembling.
"Keep going," Zeke said softly. "You're safe." Hands shaking, she lifted the hem and pulled it over her head.
When she finally stood naked before him, she braced herself for disgust. Instead, Zeke inhaled sharply, stepped forward, and cupped her face with both hands. "You are glorious," he whispered, as though he were touching a holy thing. "Built for winter, built for life, built for me." Her knees weakened. He kissed her then, slow, deep, reverent, his beard brushing her cheek, his hands warm on her waist. The kiss grew deeper, fuller, until she felt heat spread through her like sunrise breaking across snow. "Come to bed," he murmured. They lay down together, awkward at first, then less so as Zeke guided her through each moment, each touch, each breath. There was pain, yes, and fear, but Zeke was patient, steady, grounding her in whispered encouragement until fear softened into something else, something new.
When it was over and the world steadied around her, Judith rested in his arms, feeling her own heartbeat merge with his. "Zeke?" she whispered. "Yes, wife?"
"Your prophecy. Do you truly believe I'll give you 3 sons by spring?"
He kissed her forehead. "I don't believe it," he murmured.
"I know it."
Judith closed her eyes, her last thought before sleep, one she never expected.
"If this is madness, let it be mine."
The first weeks in Ezekiel Thorne's mountain cabin passed in a rhythm Judith had never known. Hard work, yes, but a kind of work that fed the spirit as much as the body. Gone were the whispered judgments. Gone were the stares and the quiet, constant pressure to make herself smaller. Here, in the wild hush of the Montana high country, her size wasn't a flaw to be corrected. It was a strength to be used. Each morning the sun rose late and pale over the snow-capped peaks. Judith woke in the loft, warm beneath furs, Zeke's arm draped heavy around her waist. His slow, steady breathing was the first sound she heard each day. He always woke before her, but stayed still until she stirred, something she didn't understand at first, until she caught the smallest smile on his face one morning, as though waking beside her was its own quiet miracle. Their routines became instinct. Judith stoked the fire while Zeke split wood outside. She cooked meals, dense loaves of bread, stews hearty enough to withstand mountain cold, pies when stores allowed. Zeke tanned hides, fixed tools, prepared his traps. They moved around each other in easy silence, a domestic harmony that felt foreign and thrilling. Zeke never hovered, but he always appeared when she needed another hand, lifting heavy pots, carrying carcasses from successful hunts, helping her reach the upper shelves, not because he thought she couldn't manage, but because he wanted to work with her. In the evenings they sat by the fire. Judith sewed or read from her battered German Bible. Zeke carved wood, small things at first, spoons, cups, handles for tools. Then one night he carved a cradle, simple, sturdy, beautiful. "You're making that awfully early," Judith said, trying to smile, though her chest tightened. "Spring will come sooner than you think." The certainty in his voice unsettled her. She refused to believe impossible things. She refused to hope too wildly. It was too dangerous. Until small things began to shift. It started with tiredness, deep, bone-heavy, unreasonable. Judith would sit down to mend socks and wake an hour later tucked under a blanket Zeke claimed he didn't remember placing on her. Then came the cravings, strange combinations she'd never wanted before. Rabbit meat with honey, hot milk with pepper. Zeke didn't laugh. He simply prepared whatever she needed. And then, almost imperceptible at first, her monthly cycle didn't arrive. Judith ignored it for a week, blamed stress, adjustment, weather. But Zeke knew. She found him one morning outside the cabin, sitting on a fallen log, staring at the valley below with a smile so soft it broke her breath. "You feel it, don't you?" he asked. She swallowed. "I don't know what I feel." "You're quickening." "No," she whispered. "It's too soon, much too soon." "For ordinary women, maybe." He turned to her, eyes alight with that strange, quiet certainty. "But you're not an ordinary woman, Judith Thorne." His hand pressed gently over her belly, rounder, softer,
slightly fuller than before. Not dramatically, but enough for her to notice. Enough for fear to bloom beneath her ribs. She pushed his hand away. "Stop saying such things. What if you're wrong? What if I believe you and it destroys me when nothing comes of it?" Zeke's voice softened. "Judy, when have I given you cause to doubt me?" She couldn't answer, because he hadn't. Not once. He waited until she met his gaze again, then said, "By spring, 3 sons. You won't need to understand how. You only need to let it happen." She turned away, trembling. Winter thickened as December gave way to January. Snow piled higher than the cabin windowsills. Storms rolled in from the peaks like great white beasts, shaking the world with their breath.
Judith and Zeke settled deeper into their routines, surviving the dark months by working in tandem. Every task felt sharper, louder, more intimate. Zeke teaching her how to mend a snowshoe, Judith teaching him how to bake bread that didn't crack teeth. Zeke warming her hands between his own when the frost bit too hard. Judith brushing the knots from his wild hair by lantern light. Zeke rewrapping her scarf when she tied it too loosely. Judith adjusting his coat buttons without thinking twice. All these little things, woven together, built something larger than either of them understood how to name. But the changes continued. Her breasts grew tender. Her appetite doubled. Her belly, fuller now, undeniably changed, felt different beneath her hands. Zeke never gloated, never reminded her of his prophecy. He simply tended to her with increasing gentleness, as though the transformation happening inside her was holy. One night, as another blizzard clawed at the cabin walls, Judith felt something flutter low inside her. Faint, impossible, like the brush of a moth's wing. She froze. Her hands flew to her belly. Zeke looked up from the cradle he was carving.
"What is it?"
Her voice broke.
"Something moved."
He was beside her in an instant, kneeling before her chair, hands warm and steady on her thighs. "Are you frightened?"
I don't know."
Tears sprang to her eyes.
"How can this be happening so fast?"
His voice was low.
"Because it was meant to. Because you were meant to bear them. Because I saw it."
Judith sobbed, quiet, shaking tears. Not fear, not exactly. Something closer to awe. Zeke pulled her into his arms and held her as though she were the most precious thing on God's earth.
"You're not alone,"
he whispered into her hair.
"I'm here. I will always be here. You do not go through this miracle alone."
And for the first time, Judith didn't flinch from the word. Miracle.
She let herself imagine it. 3 little boys born in springtime, in a cabin warmed by fire and love.
Imagined Zeke holding them, imagined herself rocking them, imagined a future she never dared believe she could have. The flutter came again. This time she didn't cry. She smiled. For the first time, the impossible seemed not frightening, but promised. By February, the mountains had settled into a dangerous stillness. Snow lay deep and unbroken in the valleys, and the forest around the Thorn cabin had gone strangely quiet. Even the wind seemed to whisper rather than howl, as if the wilderness itself were holding its breath. Judith felt the shift first. She was sweeping the cabin floor one morning when a shiver passed through her. Not cold, exactly, but instinct. A sense of something approaching. A familiar dread she'd hoped she'd left behind with her former life. She tried to dismiss it, focusing instead on Zeke's return from the traplines. He entered the cabin with a gust of cold air, stamping snow from his boots, cheeks ruddy. "You're pale," he said immediately.
"I'm fine, just tired."
He frowned. "Tired is normal, but that look in your eyes isn't." She wanted to tell him.
wanted to explain the heavy feeling pressing on her chest, but how could she when she didn't understand it herself? Instead, she said, "It's nothing, just the winter." Except it wasn't. That night, as they sat by the fire, Judith knitting tiny socks she hadn't admitted she'd begun, Zeke sharpening his hunting knives, the cabin dogs began to growl. Not panic. Warning. Zeke stiffened. Someone's out there. Judith's breath caught. Out there? In this weather? Zeke crossed silently to the window, lifted the curtain with 2 fingers, and peered into the night. A flicker of lamplight, a shifting shadow between the pines, the crunch of footsteps too heavy to be animal. "They're close," he murmured. Judith instinctively wrapped her shawl around her swelling belly. The movement wasn't fear, it was protection. Zeke noticed. He placed himself between her and the door. "No one gets near you." But the knock came anyway. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Zeke lifted his rifle, glanced at Judith, and said, "Stay behind me." When he opened the door, the blizzard wind nearly tore it from his grip.
3 men stood on the threshold, thick coats, snow-covered beards, faces hard from travel. The man in front stepped forward. "Evenin'," he said, voice brittle with cold. "We're looking for a woman, Amish, large, name of Judith Yoder." Judith's blood froze. Her hands flew to her belly, another instinct she couldn't hide. Zeke's tone turned to steel. "Never heard of her." "She ran away from her community," the man lied smoothly. "She's mentally unstable. They sent us to bring her back. Her people are worried sick." Zeke didn't blink. "Amish don't hire English trackers." The man's jaw twitched. Zeke saw it. Judith saw it. The lie cracked in the cold air between them. Then the stranger pushed harder. "She's dangerous, and she's—" "Finish that sentence," Zeke growled, lifting the rifle ever so slightly. "And you'll be thawing out in spring." The 3 men exchanged glances. Then the leader smiled, thin, sharp, ugly.
"That big woman was worth good money to the buyer in Helena," he said. "We tracked her here. Her bishop said a mountain man took her as a wife, and from the look of things," his eyes flicked to Judith's belly, "he's used her plenty." Judith flinched. Zeke didn't move, but the air changed around him, thickened, tightened, grew dangerous. "You shouldn't have come up my mountain," he said quietly. The man laughed. "We'll take her now. You want payment? We'll leave $10 at your doorstep come spring thaw." Judith's breath shattered. Zeke stepped forward, blocking the doorway completely. "You're not taking my wife anywhere." The leader's hand drifted toward his coat, toward a weapon. Judith gasped, "Zeke!" But Zeke moved first. In one motion, he grabbed the man by the coat front, lifted him clean off the porch, and hurled him into the snow. His 2 companions reached for their guns, but Zeke kicked the door shut and threw the lock before bullets struck the wood.
Judith clutched his arm. "What do we do? They'll break in." Zeke grabbed his rifle and shoved it into her hands. "You hide behind the hearth. If they get inside, you shoot." "I've never shot a rifle in my life." "Then today's the day you learn," he said firmly. "Our sons need their mother." Her heart stopped. He'd never said it like that before. Our sons. Not a prophecy, a truth. The men outside pounded on the door, curses mixing with the roar of wind. Zeke loaded his revolver. "They won't get you, Judy. Not while I'm breathing." He pushed a heavy chest against the door, then another, turning the cabin into a fortress. Outside, the attackers began circling the cabin, testing windows, shouting threats, demanding she be returned. Judith, shaking, whispered, "They came for me because I was a burden, because I cost too much, because—" "No!"
Zeke grabbed her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. They came because they thought you were alone.
Because they didn't understand what you are. What am I? He pressed her hand to her belly. A mother carrying miracles. Judith's throat closed. Outside, a gunshot cracked the air. A window shattered. Judith screamed, falling back as snow blasted into the cabin. Zeke lunged across the room, flipping the table to create a barricade. "Stay down!" he commanded. The men tried climbing in through the broken window, but the dogs lunged, snarling, biting, driving them back. Zeke grabbed his rifle. "I'm ending this." "No!" Judith cried, grabbing his coat. "If you go out there, they'll kill you." He kissed her forehead, swift, fierce, full of everything he couldn't say out loud. "Judy, I would die 1,000 times before I let them touch you." She broke. Tears poured down her cheeks as he went out the door into the blizzard, rifle raised, disappearing into wind and darkness. She crawled to the shattered window, heart hammering so hard the babies inside her kicked. Gunfire echoed. Shouts followed. Then silence. Deep, final, terrible. Judith choked on a sob. "Zeke," she whispered. "Come back to me, please." But the mountain gave no answer. Not yet. The blizzard swallowed Zeke the moment he stepped off the porch. One heartbeat he was there, broad-shouldered, fearless, a dark shape cutting through white fury, and the next he was nothing but a shadow dissolved by wind. Judith's breath hitched as the cabin door slammed behind him. For a moment she couldn't move. Then the babies kicked, hard, as if urging her awake. She crawled to the broken window and peered out. The night was a churning wall of white, snow blowing sideways with such force she could barely keep her eyes open. But far beyond the blur and chaos, flashes of muzzle fire cracked the darkness. Zeke's rifle. Then others answering him. She forced herself not to scream. Instead, she whispered, half prayer, half plea, "Lord, let him come back to me." But this time the Lord wasn't answering, and neither was Zeke. She felt her terror tightening into something sharper, hotter. Anger. Righteous anger. Her whole life she'd been told to be meek, quiet, obedient, to let men handle danger while women prayed and hid. But the mountain had changed her. Zeke had changed her. Carrying 3 sons had changed her. And she knew one thing with absolute clarity. If she stayed inside, Zeke might die. She stood. The wind screamed through the shattered window, but she barely felt the cold as she pulled on her thick wool dress, cloak, and boots. The floor creaked under her weight as she crossed the cabin. She grabbed the lantern, Zeke's spare rifle, and the long hunting knife he kept by the door. Her hands shook, but not with fear, with purpose. The dogs whined in confusion as she unlatched the door. "I'm coming back," she whispered to them, "with your master." She stepped into the blizzard. The wind hit her like a living thing, knocking the breath from her lungs, pushing her sideways, slamming her cloak against her body. Her hair whipped across her face, her eyes burned from flying ice. But she pushed forward, leaning her weight against the storm. She followed the sound of shouting. Men's voices. Men who had come to claim her like stolen property. Men who thought she was weak. The snow reached her knees. Every step was agony, her heavy body sinking with each movement, her cloth freezing to her skin, her lungs burning. But she pressed on, guided by the faint, intermittent flashes of gunfire. Finally, through the swirling haze, she saw figures. 3 shapes struggling in the snow, one standing firm, 2 circling him.
Zeke. Her heart nearly broke with relief and terror. He was surrounded. His rifle had jammed. He was using it as a club now, swinging hard, each blow sending snow flying. One attacker rushed him from behind. "No!" Judith screamed, voice swallowed instantly by the wind. She raised the rifle, braced it against her shoulder the way Zeke had taught her, and fired. The shot cracked through the blizzard like thunder. The man dropped, clutching his thigh, screaming as the snow turned red beneath him.
Zeke spun toward her, eyes wild. "Judy, what are you doing?" But the second attacker lunged at him. Judith didn't think. She charged. Her body, so often mocked, judged, condemned, became a force of nature. Her boots tore through the snow, her breaths came in ragged bursts, and she slammed into the man with her full weight, knocking him backward. They fell together, snow exploding around them. The man howled as she pinned him down, her knees sinking into his ribs. Zeke dispatched the first attacker with a swift blow to the head, knocked cold. Then he turned toward the third, still crawling, dragging himself across the snow, trying to flee. Zeke raised his revolver. "No," Judith panted. "Let him choose. Surrender or freeze." The man looked up at her, at the enormous Amish woman kneeling in the snow, her face fierce, her hair wild, her belly full of impossible suns. And he broke. "I surrender," he cried. "Just don't kill me, please, please." Zeke lowered his gun.
Judith stood, her chest heaving, snow clinging to her lashes. Zeke stared at her, not with anger, not with fear, but with awe. "You came out into a blizzard to save me," he said softly. "You're my husband." Judith wiped her face with her sleeve. "And those children inside me will not grow up fatherless." A beat passed, one heartbeat where the storm paused, as if listening. Then Zeke stepped forward and cupped her cold face in his bare hands. "Judith Thorne," he whispered, voice raw. "I have never seen a braver woman in my life." A sob broke from her lips. He pulled her against him, lifting her slightly to relieve the strain of her belly, sheltering her body with his. For a moment it felt like the storm softened around them. Then Zeke kissed her, fierce, grateful, alive. "Let's go home," he said. Judith nodded, leaning into him as they began the long walk back through the snow. The dogs' barks greeted them as warm light spilled from the cabin door. Inside waited the fire, the blessing of safety, and the fragile, beating promise of their future. The cabin glowed like a beacon through the storm, its windows fogged with warmth, its chimney spilling soft smoke into the night. Judith felt her body shaking, not from cold now, but from the fading adrenaline that had carried her through the blizzard. Zeke's arm stayed wrapped around her, steadying her weight as they climbed the porch steps. Inside, the heat hit her all at once. The dogs rushed forward, whining with relief. Judith sagged against the wall, breathless, snow melting off her clothes in rivulets. Zeke shut the door, dropped the bar into place, and turned to her with a look she'd never seen before. Not fear, not anger. Reverence. "Sit," he said softly. Judith obeyed, lowering herself onto the bench by the fire. Zeke knelt in front of her, a mountain of a man bowing to a woman who until 2 months ago had been told she was unworthy of even a simple husband. He unfastened her cloak, peeling away the frozen wool. His hands were gentle as he loosened her boots, rubbing her ankles until the sting of returning warmth eased. She watched him, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. "You saved my life," he murmured, his thumbs brushing over her skin. "Judith, they would have killed me out there."
You would have died protecting me, she whispered. I couldn't let that happen. He lifted his gaze, not at her body, not at her belly, but directly into her eyes. You came into the storm for me. Do you understand what kind of courage that takes? Do you know how rare that is? Judith shook her head. It wasn't courage. It was love. The words struck her harder than the wind ever had. She swallowed. Zeke? He sat beside her, taking her hand in his. Snow melted from his hair and beard, dripping onto the floor, but he didn't seem to notice. When I brought you to this mountain, he said quietly, I thought I was saving you, giving you a home, a purpose, a chance.
But Judith, you've given me more than I ever expected. You don't wait to be saved. You fight beside me.
She stared into the fire, the flames reflecting in her unshed tears. No one has ever said that to me. Then let me be the first of many times you'll hear it. You are not a burden, not a charity case, not a woman to be hidden away. You are my wife, my partner, the mother of my sons. He touched her cheek, his hand warm and steady. And you are the bravest soul I know. Judith's breath trembled. Do you really think our sons will be safe? In a world like this? Zeke looked toward the window where the storm still raged outside, testing the walls but never touching the warmth within. They will be safe, he said simply, because they'll have a mother who walks into blizzards to defend her family. She let out a shaky laugh that dissolved into a sob. Zeke gathered her close, settling her against his chest, his hand resting protectively over her belly.
Together they watched the fire crackle, the warmth wrapping around them like a promise. Outside, the night howled. Inside, the world was still. After a long silence, Zeke spoke again, his voice low, hopeful, almost wondering.
Judith, do you think what we have is strong enough to stand against whatever tries to take it from us? Judith lifted her head from his shoulder, eyes shining. I think, she said softly, that love born in a storm doesn't break when the world pushes back. Her words lingered in the air between them, steady, trembling, true. And the fire answered with a spark.
If you've stayed with Judith and Zeke through every storm, every prophecy, every impossible moment, thank you.
Their story reminds us that sometimes the world underestimates the very people built to survive it, and that love can take root in the harshest mountains if two souls are brave enough to claim it. Before you go, tell me, where in the world are you listening from? Your comments turn these stories into a living circle around the fire, connecting strangers like family. And if you still believe that love can defy odds, break walls, and rewrite destinies, don't wander far. The next story is already waiting for you.